All right, it's 5:30, so we will get started. Welcome, everyone. Once again, we are recording this session. If you have questions throughout the session, please type them in the chat box, and we'll have a Q&A toward the end of the program. And if you wouldn't mind muting yourselves, if you're on a phone, you can press *6. If you're on the computer, you could just hit the mute button at the bottom of your screen. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters.
Thanks, Kim. Welcome, everybody. And for those of you, we realize for some of you on the East Coast, we're in between you and dinner, so we will try to make this prompt and hopefully have a good discussion at the end. A few introductions, Aaron.
Yeah, Aaron Alhady. I'm been a 35-year veteran in the AEC, architect, engineer, and construction industry, and I oversee and am accountable from our overall productization, including our engineering, architecture, design, build services through manufacturing and assembly. Mickey and I represent one of 3 verticals at Clark Pacific, and we represent the office, building, and parking vertical and product lines.
Mickey Ankhelyi, Director of Architecture, similar, about 35 years or so in the business, probably half on the development side, the other half on the traditional architectural side, managing an office or 2 here or there on the West Coast, and then most recently in the last few years, joining Clark Pacific and being part of prefabrication and manufacturing, which has been a very different mindset indeed. Okay, let's get into this. Got a few objectives that we wanted to kind of at least highlight in the brief time we have. Why and how to approach a prefabrication strategy, what that potentially may mean, and then how prefabricated parking systems reduce owner risk, including cost. And then lastly, but not least, how to start planning for an offsite construction strategy. Industry benchmarks show that roughly 61% of typical construction projects are behind schedule, while 49% are over budget. With these outcomes, owners are looking for a more efficient, productive, and cost-effective way to build parking structures.
Yeah, and one of the things that I looked as people walked into the conference virtually. I think we've all experienced it. When the thought of an asset is realized to support an organization's business objectives, the most prevalent next action is to get those folks engaged. And usually there's different ways to get people engaged and who those people are. We think there's a different way, especially when it comes to parking and office, but specifically to parking. The knowledge on jurisdictions, entitlements, desired parking attributes specific to parking, and operational efficiencies. There is a way to de-risk a lot of the influences on on parking, and we want to talk to you all about that today.
And that image on the right you see is actually one of our projects. And no, it's not lunchtime. It's a typical scenario where you see very few folks on site, as most of the workforce is taken off site.
Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so just a quick overview. As you can tell, it's kind of a hard slide to see, or at least kind of decipher. But what it's showing is the blue bars represent the most desired outcomes with regards to your best project, and the gray are typical projects with regards to how the industry processes and delivers projects. And as you move to the right into the middle image, it still talks about on those specific attributes on delivering projects, i.e. co-location and A3 thinking and last planner system. You still have very low, high yield outputs, regardless if it's the best project or a very traditionally approached project. So why is that? I think a lot of the industry continues to be struggled with the same issues. The same issues is dealing with the uncertainty, and the things that are really always driving uncertainty that really influence a bulk of your budget and schedule uncertainty relate to what I call uniques. And those uniques include entitlements, design errors, unexpected site conditions, conventional design phase approaches, design phase services approaches, workmanship, engineering changes, design and construction. We find that a lot of our owners all of a sudden want to build buildings that is beyond kind of their core group, whether they're in healthcare or they're biopharmaceutical or they're developers of office campuses. And then the industry is getting gripped by this this notion about productivity. We're being held hostage by just ill productivity, and it's been accelerated by the pandemic. So what this translates to is cost-wise, 30% of the budget heavily influences this 70% of the outcome. So those little uniques, which I call uncertainty, is really only 30% of the cost, but it really wags the tail of 70% of your project outcome relative to cost and schedule. And focusing on the right partner is a secret sauce and essential to deal with the areas in the transaction that are high risk. Next slide. So let's see here. Looking at this slide, it's building a case for prefabrication. According to Forbes 2017, the industry employs about 7% of the world's working population, and the article suggests that unconditionally the workforce is very unproductive. According to Reinventing Construction, a route to higher productivity. This is a McKinsey global report. It talks about as the industry moves toward manufacturing and inspired mass production systems, these approaches suggest a substantial growth in productivity. And I think that's where we're starting to backdraft more and more as you start to assess if prefabrication actually might be a fit for you. Prefab is an opportunity to control uncertainty, entitlements, design errors, unexpected site conditions, a lot of those things that you are plagued with conventional design phase services approaches. And again, we're always constantly held hostage by the lack of productivity as the skill and the art of craftsmanship in products become harder and harder to find and actually harder and harder to train on. You got anything to add there, Mick?
Yeah, and I was just going to touch on, and just site conditions alone, we've had a very positive reception from either building owners that in an urban or downtown setting where we can remove a significant amount of construction mandates from the site and produce them off-site. And then the same with higher education campus settings. The chancellors of those campuses that we have worked on have had similar reactions where we come to the field with a minimal crew and can maintain probably a higher than average schedule. And so both of those site conditions have played very favorably into prefabrication.
Thanks, Mick. You want to go to the next slide? Yeah. So this traditional construction today is risky, and that's a very common theme. This slide really talks about the traditional KPIs that we all measure when we go after work. These are things that keep that are really valuable and keep owners frosty in terms of when they bring on capital programs and construction projects onto their sites. Philosophically versus traditional, studying prefab and its effects on design and build means and methods is pretty profound. And across the board, the results can be far-reaching in many industries, like I said, in those KPIs. Chichi Rodriguez once said, golf, and I'll use that interchangeably with prefab, is a thinking man's game. You can have all the shots in the bag, but unless you use them right, you're going to get into trouble. And I always think about, when I think about my experience in lean best practices and being a lean practitioner, It's a commitment to do things that are beyond, your emotional connections to what you're producing. They're beyond what teams or specific personal goals might be. And when you think about lean best practices, you want to always think about the project first. So when you think about that, you start to think about what you can commit to in terms of realizing what are the true benchmarks for KPIs with respect to labor shortages or risk to revenue or cost certainty, and then you want to commit to it and then execute and realize it. And we found that a lot of that has to happen in the beginning in delivering the best outcomes for your project. On the next slide, Mickey. It reminds me of a story. Mickey and I were at a job site visit for a prefabricator, and it was actually a fractional housing development in the Midwest and actually in the Southeast. And the superintendent was showing us around this project, which was wholly basically prefabricated, and the superintendent was very pleased about this notion that the prefabrication really worked, because when they were out there doing the work and things didn't work out, he was able to call their designers and their product people and have them come out to the site and actually fix the problems right there. They're only a phone call away, he made it sound like, and it was perfect. And so we talked about what made this prefab a success. And when you think about what prefab is, which Mickey's going to talk about, this particular project had a sawtooth design on the perimeter footprint. It had 8 different room types, and it had multiple sets of interior wall layouts. Okay, so yes, arguably you could move all of those components into a plant and prefabricate them, but that's probably not, that really doesn't embody what prefab's all about. The art of prefab is leveraging and beating the odds with regards to, as a product producer or a manufacturer of products, we have to have industry professionals that are able to translate what the industry's desires are and then actually make them real and make them practical in our products. So we have a lot of people that you would typically have in the industry working for manufacturers. Geometry, symmetry, you got to leverage. Engineering and in engineering details, we have over 100 engineers on staff at Clark Pacific. These people and this skill that they bring to the table, they can solve a lot. So manufacturing is able to actually create that force multiplier for them. And we're actually are able to create some really cost competitive and compelling prefabrication solutions. We're actively engaged in supply chain, and then we leverage our plant facilities. That's super important for prefabricators, right? So there's a lot of moving parts, but if you can orchestrate this, you can actually leverage the power of prefab. On top of that, being able to work on manufactured product actually leverages sustainability as well. So we have a lot of things in growing our focus on sustainability. Site labor is another component that we're reducing when it comes to prefabrication. Cost certainty. If we can manage that 30% with respect to those uncertainty items, the unique items I had mentioned before, then you really have a good chance of creating a highly effective outcome. Better quality. So quality is not only in the asset that we're producing for you. The value is leveraging industry professionals and experientially that ends up being truly exceptional. And because what we're trying to do is move a lot of that thinking, standardize that kind of thinking and move it to the left in terms of the level of effort. So it enables our owners to focus on not only their core businesses, but usually the parking is an add-on feature, or it's something necessary to complement, let's say, a campus setting. So we want those folks to be able to work on some of the more complicated solutions with their designers and their contractors. So quality means the transaction is truly exceptional, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mickey to talk about the Coleman Highline program.
Thanks, Aaron. Just one quick analogy that I like to use when we're onboarding at at Clark Pacific is in terms of prefabrication, is to look at it kind of like an assembly line for an automaker, as an example. The chassis tends to be the same, and if we can reuse as many of the details and components as possible, the owner can leverage that cost certainty. The outside of those buildings could be very different, but the bones of it are essentially the same, and that really helps leverage the project in a variety of respects. Quick touch on Coleman Highline, which is kind of one of our examples here. It's a larger campus setting in San Jose, next to the San Jose International Airport. As you can see, the airport kind of in the background there. Hunter Storm Development is the developer. Fisher family is partners as part of that. The overall campus is roughly 1.5 million square feet of office. There's some residential on the tail end of it, and then there's a hotel component. What's unique is on the bottom right of the screen, there's the MLS, Major League Soccer stadium, and how that plays into the parking. I'll touch on it in a bit, but portion of this is built. If you're looking at office buildings, B1, B2, I think B3, B4, and then same with the parking structures. Deke Hunter, the CEO of Hunter Properties, part of Hunter Storm. I'll just quickly read his quote. Our most recent project that leveraged prefabrication is 5,000 stalls within the Coleman Highline mixed-use development, which sits near Avaya Stadium and the San Jose Airport in California. The site shares parking with the stadium, so we had to deliver the project quickly and with as little disruption as possible so that we could accommodate Major League Soccer games taking place between March and October. So part of the decision making from their perspective was finding a way to kind of thread the needle, because the parking structures, several of them indeed provide parking for both office and soccer games. And we not only had to deal with how do you segregate some of those either attendees or office workers, but how do we thread the needle in terms of timing, schedule, fabrication, and minimize disruption to temp parking. And obviously, if you look at the bottom right below P1 is the practice field. So there was a lot of moving parts. And we had a contractor to the north of us, all those blue buildings, yellow buildings. So that was going on simultaneously as well.
You know, one thing I want to mention, Mickey, is you know, we're doing a lot of production planning in the plant. And if you look at this, it almost looks like it's a production plan, actually. You can see the asset types on the north side of the image, and then on the bottom side, you have a different. This is probably another good reason why, you know, Deke was very open to figuring out how we would utilize prefab. He probably just thinks that way.
Yeah, and to his credit, I mean, he has done both, and both in Aaron and I's background, we have done both. Meaning we've done cast in place parking structures, we've done you know, the traditional design bid builds, design build delivery. So we you know, with 35 years experience, we've been around the block. Deke's other quote: "We needed the project completed quickly and with a light touch on site. Prefabrication met all our prerequisites, whereas cast in place would have taken longer, cost more, and required a greater footprint on the site and been very disruptive to Major League Soccer games." A couple images on the right were some quick sketches done. One of the last parking structure actually straddles two cities, so 2/3 sat in one city, and that was San Jose, and the other city was Santa Clara. So we had to design it in a way that it appeased both, and we had to have some slightly different elements on either one, which made it a little bit interesting. To touch a little bit on the architecture side of it, one of the differentiators from our perspective is our buildings come out to the site and they're finished. So the exterior is, well, essentially whatever you want it to be. In this particular case, as you can see in the lower left, the office buildings in the background, which were these very elegant Gensler designed buildings for Hunter Properties, the bottom components were precast, and it was these kind of light tan sandblasted elements. And they did not want a painted parking garage to match that. So our precast components were also a light sandblasted exposed aggregate material that very much mimicked. We're very close to both color and texture to the office buildings, which was the intent and what they wanted. And then to minimize the overall aesthetic appeal, you got to remember the office buildings were the jewel of the campus. The parking was supposed to take a subservient role. We simply sprinkled some minor architectural elements, like the core 10 elements you see in the upper right image, here and there, because those were key elements that we picked up from the office building. So the goal was to make the parking structures kind of play second fiddle, so to speak, to the office buildings and to the tenants, but still have a very clean and simplistic architecture to them, and then pick up some of the design cues from the office buildings. Keeping an eye on the clock. Quick run through on the structures. PS1 and PS2, those were the two on the far right on the previous site plan. Those have been completed. You can see the rough stall count. And they have, the bigger one, PS2, has both an internal park on ramp and an exterior speed ramp to allow the ability to separate office workers and soccer attendees on an as-needed basis, and to be able to either exit or enter the building a little bit quicker. So it was a performance criteria and programming. And then PS3 and PS4 is in construction and should be wrapping up here in August of this year, and PS3 is in permitting. But similar with that one, the larger one, PS4, has the ability to kind of segregate from a programming perspective to allow for both attendees and for the office workers. One of the things we did when we broke down, Clark Park's been around for 57 years, and I'm probably guessing on this one, probably about 7 years ago or so, we started breaking down the overall company into business verticals. And one of the business verticals that Aaron heads up is the parking and structures one. And as part of that, we productized our approach to prefabrication. So our parking structure we consider it a product. And we branded it as Clark Park. Obviously, Clark, the owners, and Park, the acronym to Parking Adaptable, Resilient, and Certainty. And most of that, for the most part, should be pretty relative. But as a product, the owner, and marketing this primarily to owners, although we do work with general contractors, it made it simply easy for them. It was we were the easy button. It was one-stop shopping. They called us, and we can lay it out. We are the parking consultant. We can be the AOR. We can design it. We are the engineers. We are the general contractor, then the manufacturer, and we also erect the building and build the whole thing and turn the keys over to them at the end of the day. So that really simplified how we thought of it, and it was exceptionally well received in the market that we're in. We're based in the Sacramento market, and it has done exceptionally well in Northern California for us at this point. And it was launched a couple of years ago, I want to say 2018 or so, and we've been exceptionally busy since then. The image on the right is an example of a higher ed campus setting that was finished, I think, in 2019. Precast, hybrid moment frame, and I'll get into that in a moment, and then the vertical circulation element, and there are a couple of those that house the elevators and the stair core. And this was designed by an outside firm, and we do both. We leverage our in-house architecture as well as our relationships with outside firms.
Nikki, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We are at the 5-minute mark.
Thank you.
And we do have one question.
Okay.
A significant issue I've always had with precast single or double T parking structures are leaking expansion joints. How have you addressed this issue in newer prefab facilities?
Aaron, would you like to spearhead that or?
I will tell you that, so I came from, I've done a couple of these double T garages, and most of them that we do are double T garages. All I do know from my end is that we haven't had a lot of those issues because of our technology with regards to how we're pouring the topping slabs and then ultimately, the engineering component to this on a tight structure. I don't know if I have any more technical answers than that, Mickey, unless you do.
Well,
I
don't think we've experienced that, especially in the 4+ years I've been with Clark Pacific. And I think part of it is potentially is how we drain the top. We have a significant series of floor drains aligned at the top and everything drains towards it. So I don't think water has the ability to pool and seep between any potential joints. And caulking is done, conjointly with that. But the top of the floor is there's a topping slab. So it's not T's joint. There's a topping slab that covers the whole thing. So as it rains, the water runs to the drain. So maybe if somebody else is doing it differently, I can't speak towards that. But from our perspective, as it rains, there's no joint for it to just fall through, and it goes into the floor drains. So being respective of the couple minutes, lateral design, moment frame, shear wall, depending on the type of building. The one on the right gives you more architectural flexibility because there's more ventilation and there's a few more things you can do. Standard finishes, obviously the grays and the light tans a little bit to the left. If you look at each of those images separately, say like the very left of each, that is the form finish. And as you go to the right, you have different degrees of sandblasting. Now, with that said, concrete can be anything you want it to be, or it could be a different material such as brick. We do that as well. Quick run into this one, Aaron, as we run a couple minutes.
Yeah, let me see here. Which one are you showing? I think I'm on the next one, Mick.
Slide 18. I've got this one. How to get started with Park. 6 questions, obviously very architecturally oriented, size, shape, and location of the site, number of stalls. Having all of those answers. The geotech information is crucial. It really drives cost. We get the question a lot. So do most manufacturers, general contractors. How much is a parking structure? Well, a lot of that actually depends on the soil you're building it on. If it's not so much good soil, that foundation cost drastically went up, and you wouldn't know it if you're simply quoting on a non-foundational perspective. The level of architectural finishes, we have parking garages that are very simple, like the one in front of you, like Coleman. We have some where you can't see the building because they're completely covered with a kinetic wall that moves in the wind. It depends on what the programming specs are for the structure and what the owner may or may not want.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and hit this one. I think one of the one takeaway that I would say, I can't tell you, I would say if we get 5 calls on looking at a parking asset, usually, if not all 5 of them, they're explaining to us that they have issues with their current design or have issues with current entitlements, or we're trying to solve a problem. I would say that, we are different approach, right? So the first call could be, in addition to your traditional first calls, could be, what would your approach be in terms of a prefabrication solution for my business needs on a specific parking asset? I think that's probably where I would go. We've also, you can go to the next slide, Mickey. We've included as part of a takeaway that we'll give to Kim, but we've included what we call this
the strategy workbook.
Yeah, it's our develop your own offsite construction strategy. It is a workbook, but at the end of the day, we have just some very high level considerations that you could build into whatever solution you decide to do when it comes to parking, whether it's prefab or not, right? So, but you know, as a product manufacturer, we do have to have the in-house expertise to be able to refine and ultimately create some evolution and transformation of our parking product. So we have people like myself and Mickey and a high level of expertise in parking operations and parking function and parking design in-house. I saw another question there, Kim. Did you want to read it really quick? I thought it came up.
Yeah, I'm looking at the last couple of them. There's one on preparing for revenue control equipment as part of the typical planning. Absolutely. We have how you secure the building. All of that is client driven. And so whether they want the building open, whether it's revenue generating, whether it's fully automatic, whether it's, license plate controlled, license plate reading controlled, there's a variety of systems out there, and all of those are applicable. It all goes into that early upfront planning component. Follow up on Jeff's question: electrical network infrastructure, LPR cameras, EV charging stations, including in planning. Absolutely, all of that is. So the upfront planning sessions are a really big deal. And one last thing, comment on my side: prefabrication and design. You're moving everything to the left, so really upfront. And for some of the architects, and even some of the architects we work with on the outside of our company, it's a little bit of a struggle because they like to keep making design changes as you go along. And so by the time the site is graded, 30% of the building is done and sitting in the plant, sitting in a yard somewhere. So we got to move all those design and planning and programming questions way far to the left on the schedule. And I think with that, we got 2 minutes over.
Are we done, Kim? Or I just wanted to just mention one more thing. That's Mickey's, a lot of our campus setting projects require a level of phasing. So Mickey's expertise includes actually analyzing how you would onboard and create a phasing strategy with parking, which include a mix or a portion of parking assets, but it wants to synchronize with your office, let's say, or other needs, so that you can phase your parking needs as time dictates. Typically, you would call a traffic study or some other expertise, but we do all that in-house. I don't know if I made myself clear, Mickey.
Yep, I think so. And I think we're going to wrap it up with that. There's those that you could do a screenshot. There's Aaron and my emails at Clark Pacific. Or quite honestly, you can always call Clark Pacific, ask for Mickey or Aaron. They'll know who we are. Even though there's 800 to 1,000 of us there, we kind of stand out. So
thank you all. Thank you so much.
I appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you, everybody, for taking your afternoon to spend with us.
Thank you all for being with us. We will kick off tomorrow at noon Eastern with our panel on the dynamic curb of the future, which should also be a great presentation. Thanks you all for being with us tonight. Have a great evening.